Thanks for coming on with us today. We got a lot of action in the Middle East as usual, but what's really concerning, I mean, it's all concerning. It's 100% like every bit of what's going on in Gaza. Obviously, we got the Yemen situation. We're going to get into that, those two in a little bit. Obviously, the Lebanon attacking, the Syria occupying, and the ISIS stuff. I mean, it's insane what we are participating in right now. But the thing that is extra concerning is seeing Trump's behavior right now when it comes to pushing war. Apparently, he's pushing war with Iran right now. And so I just want to think this came out, and this is, I think we're trying to figure out the timeline here, and maybe you can help us with this. But this was the report that came out from Dave DeCamp that Trump is preparing to bomb Iran with Israel. Trump is also considering Iran's proposal for indirect negotiations, but is building up forces in the Middle East to be ready to attack. The U.S. and Israel are currently planning to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities, an attack that could happen in a few weeks' time. So this is from the Daily Mail columnist Dan Hodges, and he reported that yesterday. And then just a few more, I think Kyle Anzalone continued on this report about Hodges. He wrote in the report, while in Tel Aviv and cited Israeli political, diplomatic, and military sources, he said the purpose of the strike would be to eradicate the threat posed by Iran's nuclear weapons program, although there's no evidence Tehran has a nuclear weapons program. In fact, recently confirmed by U.S. intelligence agencies, and we know that Tulsi Gabbard had confirmed that as well. So a senior Israeli diplomatic source told Hodges that Trump's presidency offers the best time to hit Iran. From Israel's perspective, with Trump in the White House, this represents the optimum moment to deal with Iran. There won't be a better chance for war, I guess, is the end of that, should be the end of that sentence. More war, the official said. This is, I hate to say this again, I sound like a broken record, but again, this is scary. This is stuff we were talking about with Biden, starting these World War III about to blow in multiple places. But this looks like we're heading there in the next couple of weeks. What's your take on what's happening right now, Patrick? Is this alarming to you?
Well, firstly, that Hodges is one of the most notorious war propagandists in mainstream media. So while this is a real issue, he and people like him are going to really be talking up an aggressive line. That's their role. They see that as their role, to always be pushing the war narrative on this. So there's unfortunately a lot of purchase in it in sort of elite neoconservative circles, the Israeli lobby, and certain people in mainstream media. I don't think the public in America is particularly enthusiastic about it, but the politics are such now in America that there's so much blind loyalty, almost like a cultish kind of loyalty to Trump from MAGA supporters, that and they've done a very good job at demonizing student protesters on U.S. campuses, falsely claiming that they're Hamas supporters and they're supporting terrorism. Marco Rubio has been part of that propaganda campaign. Yeah. So all of that has been part of that. Those were essential building blocks to get us to this point now where people would, it's not that they want a war with Iran, but if Trump launches a war with Iran, they're not going to get in his way. They're not going to hold him accountable, because U.S. citizens aren't really going to feel any pain from that. Not directly. They will economically, which I can argue later, but militarily, they believe that they're far enough away that they're not directly, at threat. So I personally, yeah. So that's a big issue. That's why this is happening. It's the same reason why the putting this idea and getting people to hate Russia from 2016 and blame Russia for putting Trump in the White House. That was essential to build the case to go to war against Russia through Ukraine in 2022. Is really, you got to have the public behind you. They need to hate this country, or hate Muslims, or hate Russia or hate Chinese. There's got to be a reason to hate them. And while the public in America, they're not going to stop the president or stop the White House, they're not going to hold him accountable for it either. People might complain about it afterwards, but let's face it. Now, for people in the Middle East, it's a different story. Now, I think Trump is doing an extreme escalation to try to force Iran to a negotiation table. Okay. Now they're playing with fire here because they're playing with Israel. Okay. And Israel has an incredible amount of influence, way more than Ukraine or any other country in White House affairs. So much so that it's my understanding, having spoken to people with knowledge of how the Trump transition team worked, was Donald Trump was given a list of pre-approved cabinet candidates that anybody to do with national security or foreign policy had to have been okayed by the Israeli lobby. Okay. So, and that's not, it's not unusual that a lobby would do that. Citibank did that with Obama in 2008. They gave him a list of cabinet members and most importantly, the Treasury Secretary, of course, but and pretty much Obama's cabinet reflected that list. So that kind of shows you whoever paid to get Trump in office or put money in the kitty for Trump has a sort of say in policy, basically. So that's a kind of big problem here. And the problem as well is, you know, Iran, and this, I have personal, I have a personal idea or feeling, having studied negotiations, having studied game theory, to know pretty certain that Iran is not going to bend to threats. Okay, because you know, if you comply, they'll destroy you economically anyway. You know, they'll drain you dry. Look at any country that's complied with sanctions. No, actually, secondary sanctions. There are very few countries that have ever complied with direct threat front end sanctions, and Iran hasn't complied. You know, so they've been under sanctions forever. Plus the threats. There's no way that they'll comply with a future threat hanging over them or a threat of violence in the present moment and right before or after. And so it's not going to happen. They'll say, well, we're going to get destroyed anyway, so we'll hold out for the sake of our national sovereignty. And then that's used to galvanize the domestic population in Iran to base, and it gives the leadership in Iran proof that, yeah, America and Israel are trying to destroy us. Now they're threatening a preemptive nuclear strike. So, I mean, this is, if they want to weaken the regime, as they call it, they're doing everything just the opposite. They're strengthening the regime's case or the government's case in Iran. And so, again, it's like all these policies, same with Yemen. Whatever they do, it's the opposite result of what they claim they intended to do it for. And so now they're giving Iran a reason to have a nuclear weapon. And the senior advisor to the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, his name is Ali Larijani, and he said a couple of days ago that Iran will now consider lifting the fatwa on the ban on nuclear weapons, because there's a ban on nuclear weapons in Iran now. So they're not a nuclear state, but they're a nuclear threshold state, which means they could assemble a nuclear weapon in a very short notice, in a short space of time. So, but they still don't have nuclear weapons. So what Trump is proposing is preposterous, which is a joint preemptive nuclear strike against Iran before they even have nuclear weapons, that they might have them. This is totally insane. And it's even more insane when you consider the fact that the partner country for the U.S. joining in on these preemptive strikes, and it's going to be a nuclear strike, albeit with tactical, what they call tactical, low yield, low radiation, ground penetrating nuclear weapons. Okay, that's in the Trump doctrine. So you know that's going to be what they're going to bring. So, but the partner country, Israel, they have nuclear weapons. They have an arsenal of between 150 to 300. Nobody knows, because there's never been any inspectors allowed to look or see, or no regulation, no oversight, no reporting, nothing. So the thing that they're accusing Iran that that they might be doing in the future. Israel's not only done, it's done on such a grand scale, and they've kept these basically under a veil of secrecy for 60 years.
Man.
Okay, 60 years. So how could Iran possibly want to comply with these types of demands from the United States, who's already sanctioning them and damaging their country? It's just, it's unbelievable. And this is a good time, and this is what I argued. I put my peace plan up this week, is that Iran should say, okay, we'll have another JCPOA like the one Trump tore up in May of 2018.
Yeah,
but
he tore it up. Like
he
what?
he did at the orders of Israel. That's documented. That was direct order from Netanyahu's office through Mike Pompeo to basically pull the rug on the JCPOA, which was working perfectly fine. Okay, so he wants to do a new one with a Trump stamp on it. So why not now? If I was Iran, I would say, fine, we'll do this. We want to bring in the Russians, the Europeans, and we want Israel to be under the same supervision and transparency as we are. And you know what that's going to lead to? Disarmament of Israel's nuclear weapons stock. And that would be the best thing for the region. So they either both have nuclear weapons, Iran should be allowed to have them if Israel has them, or they both don't have them. And I think the people in the region would vote, if you put it up to vote in the Middle East and Asia, they probably vote for both not to have them. So there would be acceptance for this inside Iran as well as outside Iran. So, but if Israel's not going to budge, then Iran has a right to have nuclear weapons. And if you look at Pakistan and India, they've both had nuclear weapons for quite a long time. They have no intention, really. If you talk to any serious analyst, there's no chance they're going to use them against each other. But it has created a type of stability. And so, look, I'm not a fan of nuclear proliferation, but as an alternative to one country annihilating another, it has to be looked at as an option. It's not the ideal option, but it has to be looked at. We're at a very dangerous time in history. If we can't resolve a problem like this, would have been so simple to resolve 30 years ago. Yeah. So simple. Not today.
Not today. I think that's a great strategy because it puts Israel in a position where they have to do one or the other. Either they have to go along with it and account for their nuclear weapons, or allow Iran to have theirs, or they both. It's got to be equal, so that they have to respond. I think it's a great strategy. So can I ask you this? Because I saw your you had a take on, because we have different analysts are saying different things, and we know that Scott Ritter was generally gets these things right when it comes to Ukraine and Syria, Palestine, and all that. But like when it comes to this situation with Iran, it seems like he is definitely taking an offensive approach on this. How do you think somebody like him and these other people that are getting this wrong? And I'm not calling Scott Ritter a MAGA, but I'm saying there's a lot of people that maybe aren't looking at this close enough and assume that what's being said is true, and that we have to really actually be worried about Iran. How does someone like Scott Ritter get this wrong like this?
Well, I'll tell you, this is not a knock against Scott Ritter as a person or the man. I respect him a great deal. His career, I think he's an extremely valuable asset for the world, especially when commenting on these conflicts. He is able to speak freely in a way that no one in the mainstream media is. So he's an absolute treasure for so many people with these situations. Yeah. But on this particular situation, I think he's got it a little bit wrong, and that's why he joined the Marine Corps and not the diplomatic corps. Okay, he's very passionate, very aggressive, but that's not what I don't think that's what's required here. And now we're into this violent world where everything is becoming hyper militarized. So obviously people are looking to guys like online anyway, people like Scott Ritter for answers and analysis on these types of things. But equally, I can point to diplomatic veterans like Alistair Crook, for instance, who's also on Judge Napolitano's program, and Chaz Freeman, Jack Matlock, and all these experienced U.S. diplomats, the ones that speak Russian and Farsi as well as English. Okay, these are a different class of people. So I think what's required here is not a strict realist interpretation of, you know, power politics, okay, you have to put yourself into the shoes and through the eyes of the other party. You can't just settle everything by military means. There was a time when you could. That was before the First World War.
Hmm.
Where did that get us historically? Where did that get Europe? Where did that get Western civilization? It nearly annihilated it twice. Okay. And just by the grace of God, they didn't have nuclear weapons before 1945, or you and I wouldn't be having this conversation right now, quite frankly. So I think what's called here is a different approach. Scott Ritter being the weapons inspector, he should be trying to calm the situation down and demand demand the West to prove that Iran is a bad faith actor. I don't believe Iran is a bad faith actor because they have too much to lose.
Yeah.
Okay, but they have every right to a deterrent and to defend themselves as anyone else. What I think Scott is missing here, he's not holding Israel to any standard at all. He's given them a free pass, and he's arguably somebody that's opposed the Israelis, and he spoke out in favor of the Palestinians. But on this issue, you can't ignore the hypocrisy of Israel having a secret nuclear weapons arsenal and then being able to ride shotgun with the United States for a preemptive nuclear strike against a country that doesn't have nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
That just forcing them to, by threat of annihilation, to come to the negotiation table is patently insane. Yeah. It's almost psychopathic if you think about it. And I don't see this, you know, as being a successful strategy for Trump. I see that a lot of people in the Trump administration and in these cabinet positions, I think they're unqualified. I don't think they're up for the job. I don't think they're serious people. Look at the defense secretary. He's a weekend. He's like a B-rated weekend Fox News host who had a book out that, listen, all the Fox News hosts have books out all the time, and they're constantly plugging them on their show. And most of them are written by the publisher's ghostwriters. Okay, so if that's the number one qualification that Pete Hegseth got the job as head of the Defense Department, when the highest rank he had in the military was a National Guard or reservist from Minnesota or something, as a major. Yeah. How could you possibly be the defense secretary? It's kind of embarrassing, but kind of weird. But also it kind of gives you a look into what Trump values, which is media exposure, media branding. Tammy Bruce is like the State Department spokesperson. She's worse than Matt Miller. It's embarrassing. So just because somebody's on Fox and they can read a teleprompter, if that's the qualification, that you can read the teleprompter or the iPad. In Tammy Bruce's case, she's not even reading a teleprompter, she's reading off her iPad. Then if that's all the qualification is, why bother? Oh, you just need a recognizable brand face, as long as they'll read the script from the Israeli lobby or the White House, which I can't tell the difference between the two. Yeah. So you've got Pete Hegseth, you've got Tulsi Gabbard, marginally interesting, but probably would have been better as a diplomat, as a UN ambassador or a state or secretary of state for that matter, not as DNI. You know, she's a congresswoman. She hasn't done anything in the U.S. military. I think she was attached to a medical unit. She's never been out in combat in any real sense. And she did psychological operations in Africa. I mean, what's that? Propaganda for the U.S. military. So, I mean, I like Tulsi. I used to support her, not anymore, because she's gone so pro genocide.
Yeah, she's 180'd all of her positions on we have to stop regime change wars. I mean, that's exactly everything we're doing is exact opposite. But we know the Zionist tendencies there as far as the, you know, saying anti-Semitism is the worst problem we have here, which seems to be, that's the qualification, Patrick. That's what we're seeing. Everybody you're listing, the qualification, yeah, they can read a teleprompter, they can put a book out. But one thing they all have to check the box for is they all have to say anti-Semitism is the worst problem we have in our country facing.
RFK Jr. said it was the worst health crisis in America.
He's doing it on the Health and Human Services Twitter account. What are you
How can you take these people seriously? Yeah. Look, I know he didn't write that tweet. I know who wrote that tweet. Rabbi Shmuley Boteach.
Of course he did.
Wrote that tweet and made him tweet that, or somebody like Shmuley provided him, said, please, can you put this out? It would mean a lot to us. and RFK is probably okay, I'll do it, kind of thing. They've got him by the whats.
Oh
So
my God.
it's embarrassing. So it's like the whole administration. Look, the problem is, and they're running into problems here, because if the U.S. is being used this heavily by the state of Israel in the region to fulfill Israel's interests and not the U.S.'s interests and not the Gulf's interest, quite frankly, and not anybody else in the region. And let's not discount the Iranians. That's a 6,000-year-old civilization with 80 to 100 million people in the country. It's not worth nothing, whatever their opinion is. I know we don't give it any. And certainly the Chinese are not like very happy about what they're seeing. And they're kind of worth something in terms of a global opinion. There's 1 point something billion people, and India and the rest of the world, and the whole of Africa and the whole of South America. I don't think what the U.S. is, they're going it alone with themselves, Britain riding shotgun as usual, trying to get some experience in the field and maybe sell a few weapons on the back end of it. But it's U.S. and Israel. And all these policies attacking students, attacking the First Amendment to shut down any criticism of Israel in the U.S. I can't believe this.
Yeah.
This is like, and these are the conservatives that were crying about the woke weaponization of censorship and cancel culture on U.S.
Yeah.
campuses,
and words are violence. The whole thing. Words are.
Yeah.
They've now embraced that whole.
They've gone beyond it, Matt.
Beyond it. Yeah.
They're saying deport people.
Yeah.
Deport them.
Yeah.
If they criticize a foreign government, if they criticize America, they're probably okay. But this is so. The whole thing is lopsided. The scales are way out of balance, and they're gonna eventually they're gonna come into balance. But the backlash could be severe internationally, domestically, and so forth. I mean, the problem is here's the problem, Matt. Sorry for the rant. There's no opposition in Washington. There's no Democrats that have a backbone to stand up and what's clearly completely lopsided situation that's now damaging the First Amendment is the backbone of the U.S. Constitution. That's the right where all other rights stem from, and you're allowing a foreign lobby to screw with the First Amendment. This is like the damage that's being done right now it's just. Where's AOC? Where's Bernie? Where are all the liberals?
AOC and Bernie, they're on their little fight the oligarchy tour where they're fighting back against I don't know what, because they are the oligarchy, but I don't know what that is. And then you got Cory Booker, who just got off a 25-hour speech that what we just found out was noted and revised and prepped by Rabbi Shmuley, literally giving him notes.
Of course, he's been Cory's handler since Cory was in college. They spotted him as a young talent years ago, just like they spotted Tulsi, by the way. And I didn't realize this until recently, that they had spotted Tulsi in 2016 and were backing her from that early time. Miriam Adelson, when Sheldon was still alive, and Rabbi Shmuley and the whole gang. So yeah, I mean, it's like, but Shmuley probably had ChatGPT write it, I'm sure.
Oh yeah,
with a few minor edits. But sent it to Jonathan Greenblatt for a few minor edits. But did Booker mention, Yemen? Did he mention Gaza?
Patrick, he didn't have time. He only had 25 hours. You can only, right, you have to make some cuts. You got to make some cuts there, chop out the fat. Chop out the fat, you don't want to lose your audience. Keep the audience engaged for the full 25 hours. So yeah, we get it. We get it. He had it all ready to go, but sometimes you got to make cuts in post and all that stuff, which we know. So we're talking about the people in this cabinet, and you mentioned Pete Hegseth, and we know what happened with the Signal chat thing, and we know how the media deliberately got angry about the wrong thing, about giving away our plan to the horrible the Houthis. They are gonna, oh my God, they're gonna know our plan. Meanwhile, this strike that we're high-fiving and literally emoji fist bumping. This is like the people you are talking about, the Pete Hegseth, which I don't know if he personally is gonna last much longer, because he's like an extreme like caricature of all the rest of them. But the fact that he's fist bumping about this Yemen thing was part of, I think, what you said, the getting the public support for why this Iran thing is going to be more of a crucial part of protecting Americans and protecting us, when it's complete garbage. And it's like you're still going after Yemen, even though you have this Iran thing on your on the bullseye right now. This is happening, and we saw, and you had covered this on your show, and I just want to make sure our audience saw that the airstrikes are continuing, and now they're targeting this water source. So you remember the original strike was about getting one of the Houthi leaders. He was in an apartment with his girlfriend. We got him. Okay, now what you're doing, this is on a whole nother level, which we knew was coming, but the media, the Cradle's reporting it, but we don't see anybody on the talking heads on MSN, on the mainstream media doing it. This is costing what water source for 50,000 Yemenis. So we are putting U.S. military strikes on these people, not to get the terrorists, not to get hostages, not to get any other excuse, but to literally deprive them of water. This is absolutely nuts. And I don't understand how the media, how do you think, Patrick, how can the media purposely ignore this stuff? When, and this is, I actually have a particular question about this, because when we see how quick the media is to get Trump, we got to get him, how they got, look at Trump's people. They're doing this, they're doing that. Why don't they get him on this? Why can't this be something of a talking point for let's get him on this? Because this would not sit well, I believe. I think I can answer the question, but what do you, how can they get away with this?
Well, that's clearly a war crime of the worst type, and it's not the first time the U.S. have done it. Either they do that against somebody, or they get one of their proxies to do that. I personally witnessed that in outside of Aleppo in Syria when I was covering that conflict there in 2017. Immediately, the proxies went and destroyed the water, treatment plants for the whole city, basically. So one by one, taking the infrastructure out. So they're already under sanctions, Yemen. Then their water, their sewage, sanitation, their ports closed. They already created a famine there, the U.S., with the blockade of Hodeidah port during the sort of 9-year proxy war against Yemen started by Obama, which Trump continued happily, by the way, in his first term, and which Biden continued in his term. And now Trump is taking it up to another level. Do you think the Yemenis are going to stop or be deterred because Trump's in office now? No way.
No way.
They're in it for the long haul. So the reason there's no pushback from Americans is, I think we're getting into this kind of low information voter culture, and there's been so much complacency in the face of injustice. So much complacency. It's almost been conditioned as a kind of a social more, if you will, that you must be complacent with all of the social injustices or the violence that's being perpetrated by either the U.S. or by Israel or by what's happening in Ukraine as well, and other theaters and so forth. Whatever NATO's up to, Libya, Syria, etc. We just have to be. We've learned to be sort of despondent and like, wow, and I think it has something to do with this, that the Western public has been conditioned to believe the label that the Yemenis are Houthis, and Houthis, according to the Western governments, are terrorists. So anything that hurts them, any collateral damage, is basically written off. You've got carte blanche, because this goes under the wider rubric of the war on terror. And this has been so it's a Houthi-controlled water treatment plant. It's a Houthi-controlled hospital, just like it's a Hamas-controlled
hospital in Gaza, and it's
a Hezbollah
in
so
Lebanon. Yeah.
It gives you a license for mass murder and just war crimes as much as you want. All you can eat war crimes, and Israel's used this to great effect. The U.S. uses it in multiple cases, and they get away and do. But meanwhile. Al-Qaeda in Syria marches into Damascus, takes over a whole country in the center of the Middle East, bordering Turkey and Israel and Lebanon and everybody else, and Jordan. And so, and then that's fine. I have not heard a word. And all I've heard is that Trump is going to meet al-Jolani in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia next week. Now, if that happens and he shakes hands with the former ISIS deputy and head of Al-Qaeda in Syria, That is the end of, as far as I'm concerned, Trump is never going to live that down.
But
That
he's reformed. He's a reformed terrorist because I think he's
he's
got
reformed.
pronouns now, right?
He's
The
got a
he him.
reformed, yeah, head
So
chopper. He's got a new name, and
yeah,
yeah, there's been a rebrand. It's no, this is unacceptable. They're running pogroms against Alawites and Christians in the coastal regions of Syria. There's no way you can give any legitimacy to that. It's not even a government. It's a terrorist coup, literally a terrorist coup. How could you? Just the U.S. should be putting pressure on the Gulf states not to recognize that government until they have elections, or until that's what they did to Assad for years. They put him under crippling sanctions while he was at war with a foreign-backed terrorist onslaught, and then demanding electoral reforms while he's at war. Meanwhile, Zelensky's supposedly at war, but he's not allowed to have elections because he's too busy fighting the war. The double standards are just too much, and Syria is like the worst gaping example of the whole system is collapsed now. And what you get is what's happening in Syria. And if Trump meets him and shakes hands with him, I know a lot of people that will never ever let Trump live that down. They'll hound him forever for that. It'll be one of the biggest mistakes that he ever made. I think it'll be the beginning of the end of his whatever positive aspects to his legacy there were. It's done at that point. That's my personal opinion. I'm sure that I wish his advisors would, give him a word of advice on this, that this is not going to be a good look. But
I mean, I would say there's, and this is the silver lining, I think, with Trump being so loud and just so obvious, where it's like the Biden, it's the same with, we saw this with Obama, where you brought in Obama. This seems like a bizarre Obama situation. It's like reverse, right? So you bring in a new face that can get away with stuff, which I think Biden was able to get away with stuff because it was this, the good guys are doing it. Trump is so out loud and vocal about it. I just think the silver lining might be because he's so loud, because the MAGAs had gotten to a point where they were literally doing a uniting of all people that felt they felt just displaced from the Democratic Party and from this two-party system, and he pretended this was this populist movement. So he brought all these people in, and they voted for him because there were certain boxes he had to check. One was that he was going to be anti-war. He's going to end the war in Ukraine. Now the Middle East stuff is becoming more and more obvious to people. If enough MAGA speak out, which again, I think is the silver lining here, because we never saw one word on the Democrats for 4 years, not one critique of Biden and any of the horrible stuff that he caught, starting the proxy war, starting the funding, the genocide, all that stuff. But here you have, I think you're onto something here. There might be a breaking point coming where enough of his supporters might be like, wait a minute, this is enough. This is not the guy we voted for. You're clearly either been compromised, or you're too weak, or you're too stupid, or something else is going on here, and we don't like it. Do you think there's a breaking point that might be coming because the base might get angry enough?
Yeah, he had that ability in his first term. He was the first U.S. president in a very long time that was actually responsive to his base. He was reacting constantly to what his base was saying about either, who he was favoring, who he was disfavoring, what he was doing, what he wasn't doing. He was literally listening and watching social media. His team was to see and they were scared of the base because at that point they were thinking about re-election. You see. So he's actually that's the irony. A populist is responsive to his base, and I think here's the problem. I think Trump was more responsive in his first term, but I think he's less responsive to his base in the second term because he's built a power base during his time off while Biden was president. He assembled a political power base that he didn't have in 2016 when he came in, which is why he was so vulnerable to political attacks and fake impeachments and things like that. So now he's come in, he's got a bit of a base. So if there is a MAGA pushback, like what you're saying, it has to be really substantial. There's got to be some big names that are going to come out and turn on him and say, Trump, if you go down this road, you're not going to get our support. In fact, we're going to campaign against you. Like me personally, I want him to do well. I want him to be successful. I want the country to do well, but not at the expense of like the world or, our economy, or, our society, or our First Amendment, quite frankly. Just on the free speech issue, that's enough for me to basically regard, if I was being sworn in as a congressman or senate, or a general or a president, the oath you take is you defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Very simple. You're not there to defend the government. You're there to defend the Constitution. You're not there to defend the party. No, it's defend the Constitution. And if the party or the president is attacking the First Amendment, especially if it's on behalf of a foreign lobby or a foreign country, then that's, to me, an existential problem, and that's probably grounds to oppose that president or oppose that government or that regime, because at that point it's becoming a regime. For the good of the country, playing party politics is not going to help the United States of America. What people need to be responsive to issues. That's what brought that Trump coalition together. It was the issues, not the party per se. Because a lot of people hate the Republican Party who are in MAGA. They can't stand the Republican Party traditionally.
Yeah.
And they bought into this idea that this is a new Republican Party. It's more inclusive. It's anti-war. It's a common sense party, a free speech party. And one by one, all of these principles are being knocked down like bowling pins. And it's only been 90 days. So like, I don't know how this is going to go.
It's definitely inclusive. It's including the people he was against the first term. It's including the Marco Rubios. It's including the thing that you were standing up against is part of the thing. The neocons have taken over, and Israel is running everything apparently, and that's where we're at. And this World War III situation has amplified. I think that's the thing that we're going to have to admit. The MAGAs are going to have to admit. The Mahas are going to have to admit that we've only amplified this World War III problem that Biden was certainly guilty of, and every president before, apparently every single one, has been doing this to us over and over, and it doesn't matter what color they're wearing.
Judge Napolitano on his show said the other day, he said, no matter who you vote for, you always get John McCain as president.
Bomb, Iran, right?
It's true. Everybody becomes John McCain after enough time in office.
There you go.